Hello, welcome to Blick Art Materials Workshops. I'm Julie Davis, and boy do I have a fun little project for you today. This, as you can tell from the title, Mini Monets, is a project that teaches about Impressionism, and specifically a technique that Impressionists use called optical blending. Let me demonstrate to you what I mean. Can we take a look at this book over here on the table, the Monet book, and the picture that's on the front of the woman with the umbrella? As we look at this painting close up, you can see every single little brush stroke. Monet and the Impressionists didn't actually blend their brush strokes together. They just laid them right next to each other. Now this was unheard of at the time, not blending your paint together. Well, there's a reason they did this. It's called optical blending. As you pull back away and take a look at that, those brush strokes disappear. Your eye fills in the colors, the gaps between those colors, and pulls that painting together to make a beautiful shapes and beautiful forms and light, beautiful light. That's the beauty of optical blending. And you get that effect either from removing yourself, backing away from the painting as we just did with the camera, or you could actually take the painting itself and shrink it down. Here's an example I'd like to show you. Here's a pastel drawing of a horse, and you can see the strokes, every single little stroke put there. But when you shrink the painting down, the strokes disappear, and you actually have different colors, and you have a well-defined form like that. This lesson plan, Mini Monets, uses shrink film. You heard me right, shrink film. Not exactly what you'd think of as a fine art material, right? But it's a lot of fun. Who doesn't love shrink film? There's many different types and surfaces of shrink film, and what we're going to use here today is actually a matte shrink film. It has a little bit of a texture to the surface, and you can probably see as I'm moving it around there that it has a little bit of a frostiness. This texture is on both sides. You don't have to worry about either side, but you can use pastels, drawing pencils, color pencils, any sort of a dry media to draw on top of this. I've cut the sheet down to a quarter size. They're 8.5 by 11 sheets, but there's only 6 in a package, so I want to make this go a long way. So I've cut it into a quarter sheet, and I have chosen a reference photo here, a little girl in a garden. The Impressionists would have loved that. I'm going to lay this over the reference photo, and then I'm going to use some masking tape around the edges. For one thing, I want to secure it in place so it doesn't move around while I'm making it. And for another thing, it's going to provide me with a really nice border so that I don't smear my pastels when I pick this up and move it around. All right, we have a border created there, and then it's going to be time to start drawing on top of here. We're going to use Blick pastels today. Now these are a student grade chalk pastel, very intense, very pigmented. They're very good to use in this project. AP non-toxic, you don't need to worry about the dust, but yeah, you might want to have your fingers protected from it. They do get on your fingers. The neat thing about this project is that if you try and just color on here like you normally would with a pastel, or try to blend your colors together, do you see the color just will not stick. I mean, this is still a plastic surface, so the color will not stay on there and it ends up just falling off. You have to use small, short strokes, almost dots, just the way the Impressionists would have painted. This project itself insists on true Impressionism. Now the other thing, keep in mind while you're drawing this, is that an Impressionist would not use just one color to define an area. Let's go down into this grass area here. I can pick a color of green to put the grass in with. It's pretty close. But an Impressionist painter, like Claude Monet, would have used many different colors of green. So not only am I going to use a light green, I've also got a medium green in my palette of pastels, and I've got a dark green. Now, Blick pastels come in a variety of up to 48 colors, different sets, and like a landscape set and a portrait set, so you can select what you'd like to use. I'm going to come back in here with a dark now too. See, I've layered 3 colors just to make that one area of green grass down there. Now this could take me quite a while, you can see, to complete this whole. Even though it's a small picture, it could take quite a while. So I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to move this aside, and I'm going to show you one that I've already completed. This is the completed piece without the reference photo behind it. Doesn't look like a whole lot right now, does it? I know what you're saying. Julie, that just looks like a bunch of dots on a piece of paper there. You can come back in at this time if you'd like, and if you see some areas that look a little clear to you perhaps, I kind of tend to forget about some of the dark areas myself because I don't see those over the reference photo. So you can come back in and you can kind of fill some of those areas with a pastel. The next step is going to be to take this over to the oven and bake it so that it shrinks down. Now, as you can see, I already have this on a baking sheet, but I don't want to set the piece exactly on the baking sheet. Even if it's a non-stick surface, I still recommend that you put a piece of baker's parchment paper down first, just to make sure that it doesn't stick at all. The oven has been preheated to 300 degrees. The range for heating this material is 300 to 350 degrees. But I do recommend that you start out with the lower temperature. You're going to have less problems with it wanting to curl up on the ends. You can also put another sheet of baker's parchment paper over the top of this, and that will help it from doing any curling. If you do see it start to curl, I'd recommend that you just leave it in the oven. Our initial reaction is to panic and to pull it out. But if you leave it in there, as it heats and heats and the whole piece heats, it will tend to flatten itself out. All right, once again, to help us save time, I'm going to pretend that I've taken this over to the oven and baked it, and I actually do have a piece that has been baked. So let's just look at this side by side, shall we? There is a piece that's been baked. Okay, can you see what has happened? Now the pastels themselves have not changed. They are sitting right on top of that film. They didn't bake down into the film. They've just condensed and gotten smaller and closer together. This is optical blending. This is exactly what the Impressionists were trying to achieve. Now you don't want to touch it at this point because the pastel dust is sitting right there on the top, and you will smear it if you touch it. So like any pastel painting, you're going to need to fix it, to spray a fixative over the top of it. And whenever you spray any sort of material, there are precautions that you do need to take. This is Kryolan low odor fixative. I'm using a gloss finish with it. Even though it's low odor, it still has fumes and it is still flammable. So quite honestly, I would do this when the students are not around, and definitely do it away from your oven. If you spray directly down onto the pastel like this, the air and the pressure will probably cause the pastels to go flying, and you'll ruin your picture. So get back away from it, say about 10 inches, and spray up in the air just slightly so that it falls down onto the pastel. Turn it and spray it again. That way, it's not going to disturb the pigments that are on there. All right. Now, I don't really care for the border as I'm seeing it right here. I've got some fingerprints on it. You can't help but do that. What I like to do is to cover that white area. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. First, you could take some paint and you could paint right over that border. There's a sample here, a couple samples here that have had gold paint applied around the border area. Covers up any fingerprints that you have there and just gives it a really nice finished look, like a piece of artwork displayed in a frame. Some other options would be to use a Sharpie marker, a paint marker. You could also take a hole punch before you put it in the oven and shrink it down so that you would have a hole that you could make a pendant or that you could make an ornament out of it. You could put a pin back or a magnet back on it, make it a functional piece of jewelry or a magnet. There's a lot of different things you could do with it. So that's it for Mini Monets, and wasn't that fun? And what a great way to demonstrate to your students the art of the Impressionists and particularly optical blending effects. Thanks for joining us. If you'd like to have a printed format of this lesson plan, go to our website, digblick.com, and we have a free downloadable PDF version for you. On the PDF, there's a complete materials list. There'll also be a materials list following this video. There are national standards for the visual arts education as it relates to this particular lesson plan. There's also teaching objectives available. And while you're there, there's hundreds of other lesson plans. So take some time, take a look around, whatever age level you're teaching, whatever skill level, I'm sure you're going to find something else to look at as well. Thanks for joining us for this Blick Art Materials Workshop. It was great to have you here, and I hope that we see you again very soon.